Do me a favor. Take your phone out for a second. No, seriously. Take it out and look at it. How many contacts do you have? 200? 500? 1,000? And how many followers? How many people have liked your last post? How many unread messages are sitting in your inbox? Now, let me ask you a different question. If your world fell apart today, who would you call? Not who could you call? Who would you call? Who knows the version of you that doesn't make it onto social media? Who has seen you ugly cry before? Who knows what keeps you awake at 3 a.m, right? Who knows what you're afraid of? Who knows what you're pretending isn't hurting? You know, it's a strange thing. We carry around a device that allows us to reach almost every person we've ever met. And yet millions of people feel completely invisible. We've built a world where everyone can hear us, but very few people actually know us. And I don't think that's because we've forgotten how to communicate. I think we've forgotten how to connect. This is The Forge.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome back to The Forge, everybody. It's been a hot minute. It really has been a hot minute. You know, again, I apologize for the audio again this week. The studio is coming along fabulously. It's really starting to be a space that kind of represents what we're all about. So instead of going on a temporary hiatus, we're just going to rock the audio because we started that way. We're going to continue that way. And we'll get back to the video pretty shortly. But, you know, today I want to talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention, at least not the attention I think it deserves. And it might piss some of you off, and that's okay. You know, I don't mind the chaos. Chaos is my baseline, dude. I can sit in that all day long. But if it brings up some feels in you, then we're probably heading in the right direction. But today I want to talk about loneliness. Loneliness, and not the kind of loneliness that comes from physically being alone. It's the kind that happens while you're surrounded by people, right? The kind that happens in marriages, at family dinners, in college classrooms, inside military units, at hospitals, inside fire stations, at churches, even rooms that can be filled with some laughter. Because, you know, loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of being deeply known, right? Being deeply known, actually being seen without your mask on. And I think we're living through one of the strangest freaking moments in human history, right? We really are. We have unlimited communication, like unlimited communication. We have unlimited entertainment, unlimited information, unlimited access. But, you know, somewhere along the way, we traded intimacy for interaction, right? We've traded that. We've substituted intimate relationships for surface level interaction. And those are not the same things. And I want to say something early in this episode because I think it's important. This isn't about blaming technology, and this isn't about blaming younger generations. That's not what we're doing here. And it's not about pretending life was perfect 50 years ago, because it sure as hell wasn't. All right. It sure as heck was not perfect 50 years ago. Every generation has had its own struggles, but I think every generation has also shaped the way people relate to one another. They really have. And the question isn't whether technology is good or bad. The question is, what is it doing to us, right? Not our phones. What's it doing to us? Because if we're honest, most of us have become incredibly easy to reach and also incredibly difficult to know, right? We've become easy to reach, but difficult to know. And phew, that's kind of heavy, at least in my opinion. That's pretty heavy. But I want to challenge an idea that almost all of us have believed at some point. We tend to think loneliness means being by yourself, sitting in an empty apartment, eating dinner alone, not having plans on a Friday night. But really, that can be a form of loneliness, but that's not the loneliness we're talking about. That also can be solitude. And solitude, at least in my book, man, that's a healthy thing. Like, solitude is healthy. Um, some of the best decisions you're ever going to make, some of the clearest moments you'll ever have is going to happen in solitude. It's going to happen when you're completely alone. So loneliness, in my opinion, it's different, right? It hits differently. Loneliness is the feeling that no one truly knows you, right? Nobody knows you. Nobody knows you without these masks that we put on every single day, right? You know, you can experience that in a crowded room. You can experience that lying next to someone you've been married to for 20 years. You can experience that while your phone is buzzing like every 30 seconds, because loneliness isn't measured by proximity. It's measured by connection. And there is a massive difference between being around people and being emotionally known and seen by people for who you actually are. That's really the biggest difference here. And I think that's one of the greatest freaking tragedies of our time. We've become masters at staying in contact. Like, we really have. We are a society that's fantastic at staying in contact. Um, but we really are beginners at letting people into our lives. Right. So think about the conversations, thank you, that you've had this week. How many started with, how are you? And how many ended with, I'm good, right? What a fascinating exchange. What a fascinating exchange, right? Like, that's the kind of exchanges that happen. Like, you're walking down the sidewalk and someone like gives you a gentle nod. And they're like, hey, how you doing? But they keep walking. They don't give a shit. They don't. And neither do you. You really don't. If you're asking yourself, you really probably don't care, right? It's like that thing, just that exchange, because it's cordial, but it's not that like we really want to know how someone's doing. It's not that we even really maybe want to share how we're doing, right? It's just a strange exchange, it's like, walking in New York City, like, how many people do you pass by every single day on the sidewalk? And it's like, you could give a shit. And it's kind of sad, right? It's a fascinating exchange. It's two people acknowledging each other without actually knowing anything about each other. Because I'm good has become less of an answer and more of just like this social agreement, right? I'm good. It means I don't want to burden you. I don't know if it's safe to tell you the truth. I'm good might even mean I'm not even sure I know how to explain what's going on inside of me. And maybe, just maybe, we've become so practiced at performing wellness that we've kind of forgotten how to experience honesty, right? You know, we're practiced and well versed at performing wellness. Um, One of my friends a while ago, uh, who was on the show, Chats with Chappie Cottle. Got to give a shout out to that guy. Go over on TikTok, social media, Facebook, all of that. Chats with Chappie. He made a good point, and I can't remember if he posted this or if he just stated this in a group chat, but it was Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And he said, at what point do we stop being aware and we start doing something about it? I just respected the heck out of that so much. We've just forgotten how to experience like this honesty, right? Where we just stay in these checks and balances in this safe little area. But to kind of expand on that, your brain was never meant to do life alone. Like, it wasn't. And call me a liar, don't believe me, but your brain was not meant to do this alone. Let's step into the neuroscience for a minute. And I promise not to turn this into a college lecture, but I do want you to understand something pretty incredible, right? Your brain has evolved in communities, right? That's how your brain evolves, is in communities. And for most of human history, being separated from your group wasn't just lonely. Like, it was dangerous. It could be dangerous, right? Without other people, there was less protection, less shared labor, less food, less support. Like, there was a less chance of you surviving hardship and honestly surviving, period, right? Because of that history, our brains developed systems that are highly sensitive to social connection and social isolation. And it's kind of fascinating because in addition to being a trauma therapist, I practice animal assisted therapy. And I practice animal assisted therapy primarily using prey animals, right? So prey animals are horses, rabbits, animals that are used to being someone's dinner, basically. And, that idea of having a partnership of where someone understands your same fears that you experience every day, man, that's how prey animals stay safe, right? It's like a herd mentality, but we just don't have our herd anymore. We think we do, but we don't, right? So researchers like, I'm going to totally flub this guy's name. And I promise, like, I do know his research, but I suck at names and pronunciations. John Cassiopo. John Cassiopo. John, I'm so sorry if I flubbed that. I love your research, though. This dude, let me tell you, he spent decades studying loneliness. He really has. And what he found changed the way that we kind of think about it, right? So loneliness isn't simply an emotion. It's a biological signal. In many ways, like, it's kind of similar to hunger. Like, think of it like that, or thirst, right? Your body isn't trying to punish you. It's trying to tell you that something important is missing. And when loneliness becomes chronic, man, your nervous system begins changing. Your brain becomes more alert. It becomes more watchful. It becomes more suspicious. It starts scanning for rejection, for criticisms, for signs that you just don't belong. Right. And think about how freaking exhausting that must be. I don't really have to think about it because I've felt that before, right? I'm a human, right? I've felt that before. It's exhausting. You're already lonely. And now your brain is interpreting the world through a lens of possible exclusion. That is like such a vicious cycle. It's such a rat bastard of a cycle. You begin withdrawing. Other people notice the withdrawal. The relationships weaken, which reinforces the loneliness, which strengthens this belief that no one really cares. Loneliness isn't just painful. It can become kind of self-perpetuating. Like, it really can. It's just like, it's just like a cycle that, like, once the ball starts rolling, it's just going to keep going around and around and around. And I think Our next important point of this that I want to try to make is that, we really do, as a society right now, I believe that we really confuse visibility with connection, right? Visibility with connection. I want to ask you guys something. How many people know what you ate today? How many people know what you ate today? Probably quite a few. How many people know what you're worried about? Oh, yeah, that gets a little different, right? That gets a little different. That's a different question. Social media has kind of given us unprecedented visibility. We share our vacations, we share our promotions, our workouts, our coffee. We share our freaking opinions, man. We share our pets, our successes, our highlight reels. And yet, visibility is still not intimacy. It's not intimacy. Someone can watch your stories every day for 5 years and still have absolutely no idea who you are. No idea. They know your content, but they don't know your character. And I'm really trying to hold back on this one. I'm really trying to hold back on this one because presentation can make you believe anything you want to believe. Someone's really awesome presentation of themselves, man, believe me, I know people out there. This is not a generalization. I know of people right now. I know of organizations right now on social media that have tons of followers that are generating such high regard of who these people are, what they do. But you are not seeing their character, my friend. You are not seeing the character of the people that are leading these things. You're not seeing the character of your favorite content creator. You know their image, but you do not know their inner world. And sometimes without realizing it, we kind of start substituting one for the other, And if we're some people that are posting and making posts, like we might think, hey, people saw my post. Therefore, I've been seen. But being viewed isn't the same as being known, right? The algorithms reward attention. But the human heart longs for understanding. And listen, I would be a complete hypocrite if I didn't acknowledge that, yes, algorithms are my friend. They certainly are my friend. However, you have to set an intention, right? I want algorithms to be forever in my favor because I believe what I'm posting. I believe the message that I'm trying to put out there, right? My message is not to be completely right all the time, and my message is not to be the smartest person around. It's simply to get people to think. So yeah, I want the algorithm to reward attention. But if I shifted that and said, well, the reason I'm doing this is because I really want to make human connections and friends. Listen, the human heart longs for some understanding, right? But it ain't really going to happen here. I'm not saying it can't, but in general, it doesn't. And, those are kind of two separate things. Attention says I noticed you. Connection says I understand you. Attention lasts seconds. Connections, that stuff changes lives, right? Connections change lives. And somewhere along the way, many of us became rich in attention and so bankrupt in intimacy, dirt poor when it comes to intimate connections. And if you've ever left a room full of people and somehow felt even more alone than when you arrived, trust me, you're not broken, right? You're experiencing the difference between interaction and connection. And those things are miles apart, miles apart. And in standard fashion, I want to ask you something else. What would happen if every thought you've ever had this week was somehow projected onto a screen behind you, right? Every insecurity, every fear, every regret, every mistake, every jealous thought, every moment that you questioned yourself, how uncomfortable would that feel? Most of us, I think we spend an enormous amount of energy managing how we're perceived. And I don't think that's because we're fake. I think it's because we're afraid. It's because I'm afraid. I ain't going to blast my stuff all over a wall right behind me just to let the whole world see that. You kidding me? Like, that's scary. It's scary to be seen on that level, right? We're afraid that if people saw the whole story, they'd leave, right? Psychologists call this shame, right? They call this shame. And shame is different from guilt, right? Guilt says I did something bad. Shame kind of says I am something bad, and those are worlds apart. Shame convinces us that if people knew the real us, man, they might reject us. So how do we overcome that? Well, we perform. That's how. We become the funny one. And I'm the dependable one. I'm the successful one. I'm the strong one. The therapist, the firefighter, the police officer, the nurse, the veteran, the entrepreneur, the parent, the caretaker. The list is literally endless, right? I'm the one who always has it together. And after years of playing that role, something strange happens. People don't actually know us. They know our performance, right? Think about that. The mask that protected you eventually became the thing that isolated you, because nobody can love a version of you they've never met. They can't. People can fall in love with an idea of you, but they're never really seeing you. You know what I mean? And I don't know, like, that's not cool, right? And I think this is my personal belief, if we're getting vulnerable here. I think one of the greatest fears human beings carry, I don't think it's death. I don't think it's death. I think it's being fully seen. I think it's being fully seen. And that is probably my own projection, thinking that that might be everybody else's greatest fear. But hey, death is death, right? But being fully seen, that's pretty scary. And allowing people to decide, if we're worthy or not, right? If we're worthy of love after we're being seen, that's pretty scary. That's pretty scary. But, we've talked before about vulnerability. We know what vulnerability is from previous episodes. If you haven't tuned in, check them out. Vulnerability is that part that, I'm showing somebody all of myself, right? And I am giving someone the opportunity to see parts of me. And if they know everything about me, there's a possibility they could weaponize that, right? But I trust that they won't, right? But that's why vulnerability can feel a lot like danger, and let's talk about your brain again. Have you ever noticed that telling someone you love them, man, that can feel more terrifying than giving a presentation to like 200 people, right? To really come out and say that you love somebody, right? Whether it's romantic love, platonic love, whatever it is, like, that can feel pretty scary. Have you ever noticed that saying I'm struggling can make your heart race, right? Especially my first responders and vets out there, to admit that you're struggling. If you ever think of that thought in your head of what would it be like to tell someone I'm struggling, if I'm struggling, take a moment, close your eyes, take a breath, feel what you're feeling in your body, right? You might notice your heart race. You might notice your muscles tense up, right? That is not weakness, my friend. That is not weakness. That's neurobiology, right? We become emotionally vulnerable. When we become emotionally vulnerable, the brain doesn't always distinguish between emotional risk and physical risk. The anterior cingulate cortex, right? I say right, like you fucking know what that is. You don't have to know what that is, but the anterior cingulate cortex, it's an area involved in processing emotional pain. And it also becomes active during experiences of social rejection. Bet you didn't know that. Yeah, it does, right? So the part of your brain that processes emotional pain, it starts to get all happy and active during social rejection. So in other words, our brains take rejection very seriously. Very seriously. It doesn't take it as a walk in the park. It also doesn't mean emotional pain is identical to physical pain, but it does help explain why rejection can feel so deeply wounding. And if you've ever sent a vulnerable text message and then stared at your phone waiting for a response, you felt it. You felt it, man. You felt that, you felt that anterior cingulate cortex. And your heart beats faster, your stomach tightens, your mind starts creating stories. Maybe I said too much. Maybe I shouldn't have opened up. Maybe they're pulling away, right? Your nervous system begins trying to predict danger. And it's not because you're irrational. It's because your brain is trying to protect something incredibly important. It's trying to protect that feeling of belonging to someone. And that's a tragedy, and the tragedy is that many of us respond to that fear by becoming less vulnerable, right? Well, if I just don't be vulnerable, then I just won't feel this way, right? That's just human conditioning, which feels safer until years pass and nobody actually knows us, right? Protection becomes isolation, and isolation slowly becomes our identity. It can, and kind of a thought that has been trickling around in my mind lately is like, your brain could give a shit if you're happy or not. It doesn't care if you're happy. It cares that you're safe, right? It cares that you feel safe, that you feel emotionally safe, physically safe. Happiness is just icing on a cake if you get it. That's how our nervous system protects us. And so there's a little trap, right? I'm going to call it, I don't know. What am I going to call it? The performance trap. Let's call it the performance trap. I'm going to make a confession here. Here we go. Tyler is making a confession. As a therapist, I've seen this in nearly every single profession. People become exceptional performers. They're the person everyone counts on, right? The one who always answers the phone, always fixes the problems, always carries the weight, always keeps the peace. Everybody thinks they're incredibly strong. But then they sit down in my office and quietly say, I don't think anyone really knows me. Man, that sentence, that breaks my heart almost every single time. Because here's what's happening, right? They've become so indispensable without becoming intimate. People rely on them. They admire them. They respect them. They need them. But very few people know what it costs to be them. And maybe you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe everyone in your life thinks you're doing great. Yeah. Meanwhile, you're hanging on by a thread. And that performance becomes exhausting. Because eventually you realize you're getting applause for a character you created, not for the person underneath. Fuck. I'm going to say that again. You're getting applause for the person that you created. And you realize that's not really who you are, right? I mean, hey, and that's my gig too. Like, trust me, that's my gig. I feel that a lot. Because eventually you realize, that applause starts feeling strangely empty, because what you really wanted wasn't admiration. It's kind of understanding, right? It's understanding. And those are not the same things. Admiration says, you're impressive, dude. But understanding says, I see you without all of that fluff. Human beings, we don't survive on admiration alone. We survive on being known, right? We survive on being known. But being known, that takes some courage to be known. So where do we go from there? I don't think the answer is deleting every social media account. It's not, you know? I don't think the answer is pretending that technology is evil. I think the answer is kind of a little more simplified, but it's much harder, right? We have become willing to let someone know us, right? That's the answer. We have to become willing to let someone know us. Not everyone. You don't need every single person that follows you to know you. You don't need 1,000 people. You probably don't even need 10, if I'm being honest. You don't even need 10. Research kind of consistently shows that the quality, right? We're talking about quality of relationships, and that matters far more than the quantity. One or two deeply trusted people in your life can make an extraordinary difference. I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about. One or two people can change your whole life if you allow yourself to be safe to be seen by them. So maybe the question really doesn't become, how many friends do I have? I think the better question is who knows the truth about my life? What I go through on the daily basis? Who is this man behind the mask? Right? Who's this person behind the mask? Who knows what you're grieving? Who knows what you're ashamed of? Who knows what you're hoping for? Right? Intimacy doesn't happen accidentally. That's such a fallacy that intimacy just happens. It doesn't. It happens when someone risks honesty and someone else responds with acceptance, right? That's how trust is built. It's like, I'm going to show you all of my messy crap. I'm going to show you all of it. And I'm going to trust that you see it, that you respect it, that you accept it as being a part of who I am, and you still show up for me, right? It's one conversation at a time. It's one truth at a time. It's one act of courage at a time, right? And yes, sometimes you will be disappointed. I promise you, you will be disappointed. Sometimes people won't respond the way you hoped. But if you never risk being known, I guarantee your loneliness, right? I guarantee it. It's going to happen. If you don't risk being known, you're pretty much sealing your fate on being lonely. Connection is going to always require some degree of vulnerability. There is no shortcut. There never has been. There never has been. And I know this was kind of a lot to unpack today, but, when we think about these relationships that we build, right? Especially these social relationships on social media platforms, right? I'll tell you right now, drop off social media for a week or two, see who reaches out to you, and those are going to be the company. That's going to be the company you want to keep, right? The company that says, hey, man, is everything okay? You went dark. Those are the ones that you might want to try to invest in a little bit more, right? So before we finish, I really want you to think about one person in your life, just one, someone you've been meaning to call, someone you've been meaning to text, someone you've been meaning to tell a truth to. And maybe you've convinced yourself they're just too busy. Maybe you have convinced yourself that they don't care. Maybe you've convinced yourself that you're too much, right? You're too much. This would be too much of a burden. I don't want to bother them, right? What if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? it's not, courage is not difficult because it's comfortable. Courage is so uncomfortable because connection has always required someone to make the first move, period. Connection requires, it really just comes down to really one brick in the wall. It's one conversation. It's one honest moment. One honest moment at a time. You don't have to spill your guts and your whole life to somebody, all your deepest, darkest crevices of your mind and your soul. Like, you don't have to do that all at one time. Just start with being honest with one part of yourself. And honestly, maybe it starts with just being honest with you first. Looking yourself in the mirror and accepting some of those parts, right? I think that's a little prerequisite work maybe for making connections and being vulnerable. Can I be vulnerable with myself? Might be something to think about, right? I really appreciate you guys listening. Listen, I don't think we're living through a crisis of communication. I think we're living through a crisis of courage, right? We know how to send messages. We really do. We've forgotten how to reveal ourselves. We know how to stay in touch. We've forgotten how to stay connected. We know how to build audiences. Better believe that. But we've forgotten how to build relationships. So this is going to be my challenge for you this week. I want you to have one conversation that isn't efficient. Have one conversation that isn't efficient. And what I mean by that, have a conversation that's not about work, that's not about logistics, that's not about fixing anything. Just a conversation about being honest. Ask a real question and give a real answer, right? Tell someone something true for a change. Because really the opposite of loneliness isn't being surrounded by people. The opposite of loneliness is being deeply known. And maybe in there somewhere, just maybe, someone in your life has been waiting for you to go first. They've been waiting for you to go first. And it might have this beautiful trickle-down effect, right? Buy the ticket, man. Take the ride. See where it takes you. You can always get off and take a different train, take a different path. But this game of stalemate, of fear, it's just leading you back to the same station. Check it out. See what you come up with, right? Leave me a message in the comments. Shoot me an email. Tell me how it's working out for you. I'd love to hear about it. I really would. Folks, this is The Forge. Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay freaking wild. I'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Social media isn't a replacement for therapy. And while I am a therapist, I am not your therapist. Please reach out to your local resources or call 988 if you are in crisis. This is educational content only, not therapy or a replacement for it. Rather, a little education for you along your way, along the journey.